I've been playing another little game called Hellblade
Sure,
2.
little, hey?
A little. Sorry, I've got this cough. It's really annoying.
How
So
dare your body
I've-
betray you like this?
I've played and rolled credits on Hellblade 2, which is a sequel to, I think, when did Hellblade 1 come out? Maybe 6-ish years ago?
Sure, yeah, it feels like a while ago.
7?
Yeah.
It feels like ages ago. But if
Did
you
you
don't
know that it originally only launched on PlayStation?
Yep. Wild.
I
Absolutely
forgot
wild.
about that and only read it again this month, and I'm like, wow, that's strange.
So if you don't know, Hellblade 1 was a game by Ninja Theory, but it's interesting in that it was kind of like not like I say an indie project, I mean that it was a smaller scoped project, like made by a small team, just a tight 6-hour experience, almost like an experimental game that is actually very good. I don't think you've played Hellblade 1.
I haven't yet, no.
So yeah, Hellblade 1, well, it's called Senua Sacrifice, Hellblade, whatever. It's basically a story about Senua, the titular character, who is going through some stuff. Okay, I'm not going to get into the story beats, but what made that game really special is that the way it tackled the narrative was interesting, in that you're playing Senua, but you hear the voices in her head. Like they're called Furies, and there's 2 or 3 of them, and they're often like talking over and above Senua, and it made for a very unique experience because she's dealing with psychosis.
Yes.
Which is like, I don't know if it's been done in a game before, and if it has been done, it's never been done like this. So it was a very unique experience in that if you're playing this game with headphones, you'd be walking through a party and you'd have a voice in your left ear going like, you can't do this, and one in the right saying, yeah, you definitely can't do this, and just like this banter back and forth, and then Senua having to like deal with like, oh my god, like what the hell's going on here. So the second story picks up, it's a direct sequel. I'm not going to spoil the first game for you because you might still want to play it, but Senua's people have been taken by Northerners as slaves, for reasons you don't know.
She's like a Viking.
She's like a Viking, yeah. But you've got these Northmen who are coming and taking your villages and like just causing chaos. So what Senua does is that she lets herself be captured to be taken to the slavers' location, so she could, like deal with the rot at its core. And en route on the ship to Iceland, where the game takes place, you encounter a storm and you're shipwrecked. And that's where the story picks up now. What you're seeing, if you're watching the video feed, is me on, these sort of desolate beaches, trying to find my way forward. And if you're watching the video feed, sorry if you're not, you'll notice that this game is like absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, it's really like one of the most visually, like,
it's,
I don't know, polished games I've ever seen.
It's like we have to say, sorry, pardon the pun, like it is unreal. Built in Unreal Engine 5, and I don't know how many Unreal Engine 5 games there are. Is this one of the first?
Nah, there's quite a few
couple.
now. I mean, even Fortnite's in Unreal Engine 5 now.
Fortnite's
So
Unreal Engine 5. But
yeah.
I mean, this game.
This was like the first game announced.
I
Like,
think announced
when it was
first.
announced, Unreal Engine 5 didn't even exist.
Yeah.
So
And you can see this, I think, is like a technical showcase for what this engine can do in terms of, lighting techniques. Lighting textures, sorry, not techniques. And just, general aesthetic of a game. I played this on PC and it ran, I mean, I've got a pretty strong PC, but it ran perfectly, like no issue. And honestly, like I was saying to you before we started recording, I wish I'd played this on a big screen because my little PC screen, I feel, did not do it justice. But in terms of like that to me is like huge tech, really great on that front. Like no doubt, Hellblade 2 looks good. In terms of narrative and gameplay, like it's not difficult to talk about, but I don't want to come down hard on this game because I did enjoy it. I rolled credits and I would recommend playing it to anyone. But it feels like, when you come from Hellblade 1, which is a smaller game made by a small team, and you have Hellblade 2 in the oven for like 6 years with a much bigger team, bigger scope. Now you've got Microsoft backing you. You're owned by Xbox. I don't know what I expected, but maybe something maybe a bit more groundbreaking. Because for all intents and purposes, this game follows a very similar structure to the first one. It's very linear. You are like on rails walking down a path. There's like when I say open areas, I mean like you might go left down a path, get a dead end and a collectible and come back. Like it's very, very on rails, guarded.
Yeah.
Which like, is it a bad thing? I don't know. That's up for debate. I mean, if you're trying to tell this, very tight narrative, like I get that intentional choice, but it just feels like it follows too closely. It just follows the structure of the first game a bit too closely. Which I guess it's just weird because, like I said, this game's been in the oven for a long time, and I don't know, maybe my expectations were...
It's been like 5 years since it was originally announced, And I do recall, I mean, there was a big fuss made over, like, when it was announced. It was actually announced at the very last E3, well, the last E3 that existed and the last E3 I went to.
Sure, why not?
And I remember there was a big fuss made over, like, the trailer. Everyone was like, oh, that's actually in-engine. Oh, that's real-time. Oh, this is Unreal Engine 5. It's just can't say it is because obviously Epic hasn't announced it, this, and that. And I think there was an article that came out like a month or so ago where Ninja Theory were like, yeah, when we put out that trailer, the game didn't exist. Like, straight up, there was nothing on the game that had even started. So the idea that trailer was like showing in-game visuals and in-game, it like was a complete farce. It didn't. Yeah. That wasn't the case, So it explains why the game took so long. Because they were essentially just starting production on it. But I think, having not played this and having not played the first one, I get the criticism of like it being very on rails. It reminds me a lot of when. Did you ever play the Order 18? Was it 1886, 1866?
But no, I know of it,
like that game when it came out on PS4 had a similar impact in terms of, oh wow, it feels like I'm playing a cutscene. Like it had that similar moment where you didn't realize the cutscene had ended and you had been given control of the game. But the criticism levied at it at the time was that it traded its gameplay in service of visual fidelity, because like when you restrict player choice and movement and you really only allow certain interactions in a game, you can focus more on visuals because you're limiting what a player can do within that space and what they will see. And the Order 1886, I think, that's what it was known for, and I think Hellblade 2 is probably going to be known for the same thing, where yes, visual showcase, but from a gameplay perspective, not much there.
No, look, it's like frustrating is not the right word, but like the in terms of the gameplay, the combat, for example, feels good. Like I think in the first game, you could kind of tell, and like again, this isn't an intended criticism, but you could kind of tell like, oh, this was made by a smaller team. It's like a little bit rough around the edges. Whatever ways, if you watch any of the video footage, like the combat is like weighty and it feels like, I think Noel put it best, where every fight feels like you are fighting for your life. It's you walk into a thing, you're like, oh my god, like you can feel like the weight of the sword and the desperation. The problem is like, even though the runtime of this game is about, look, it's longer than the first one. The first one was about 6 hours. This is running in just about 8 hours. So by the end of the game, the combat is like, that's it. There's feels like you kind of get bored of it a bit. There's no enemies
progression.
Change. Yeah, but enemies change. But it's not like you play with a different weapon or you learn new attacks or different abilities. It like the combat you get from the first hour is what you get in the last hour. And by that point, even though combat is like, it's sort of spaced out between the playthrough, by the end it feels like very samey, and it's just like I don't know, it feels like maybe it's unfair to criticize that when the game isn't focused on the combat necessarily. It's more about the narrative and telling the story, but the combat is there, and it feels like if you make it look this good and feel this good, like it would have been maybe nice to have some variation as you progress through the game, like even if it is a new weapon or I don't need like a leveling system, but something that, you know, makes it just grow progressively. Joe, it's such an interesting thing. Yeah.
Just looking at the combat here, it's like you can tell that they really invested in like animation work and fluidity and stuff, but at the same time, it feels like they want you to see that work. So they restrict what you can do in that space. Like, it looks almost like the combat is on rails to a degree where you are just responding with parries and attacks. You don't necessarily have so much control over Senua's movements around that little like combat arena. You know, it doesn't look fast. It looks very slow, methodical, which obviously adds to the weight of it. But it's also done so that it can look the way it does, to my eye. Yeah.
No, it's an interesting one because I would recommend playing this game, no doubt. There are just things to keep in mind, like that I've mentioned. It's linear. Exploration is like not really a thing. But if you're here for an interesting story and just like a visual showpiece, I mean, you have to play this game. It's gorgeous. I mean, and even it's interesting you say like you're right in that they've got the camera and they want you to see specific things. But something I've never seen before is that if you pull open the photo mode in this game, you can move the camera anywhere, even in cutscenes.
Oh, really?
Which is very cool because it just shows that everything's in engine, right? They're not trying to. They're obviously framing something, but when you go into photo mode, it's like, well, you can see how we've positioned the characters. Like, we're not hiding anything. What you see is what you get. So that's pretty cool. It's an interesting game. I'd actually be very interested for you to play it because I'd be curious to know like what you think of it.
I feel like I have to play the first one though, like at least from a narrative perspective, to get an idea of, you know, some of the struggles that have led Senua to where she is now.
No, I will say the game opens with a very good recap of the first game if you have no interest. There's like a very good 2-minute video which explains like beat for beat what happens in the first game. I mean, not beat for beat, but like a good broad stroke of what happened in the first game.
Yeah. I mean, just looking at this feed, I mean, this is me watching a very small screen on Discord that is obviously compressing the video to get it to me. Like, it still looks ridiculous.
The game looks like it's gorgeous. This is a benchmark for what games can look like on Unreal Engine 5.
And that's cool. I mean, if that was the focus of Ninja Theory, like, more power to them. But, you know, obviously that doesn't excuse the criticism of this feeling like you're playing a cutscene, which is a criticism levied to games like Uncharted all the time. You know, it feels like you're moving from one linear set piece to the next, and at what point does interactivity give way to cinematic and, you know, visual fidelity? So it's a tight rope to walk, I think. And, you know, in the news, there's been this indication that Ninja Theory has already had their next game greenlit, and I would assume it's another Hellblade. I just hope that they maybe take some of that criticism to heart, and, you know, I'd think a third game in this exact same fashion would not go down well.
No, I think, like, I understand why the second one is this, but a third one, I don't know, you need to do something. I don't know what you do, like, but you can't just do the same thing again. I don't think it feels very dated. Like, even just walking. It's so weird because you look at the landscape in this game and it's like, oh my God, it's beautiful. There's you go from, like, you know, these desolate beaches to, like, there's a forest bit, there's just things you get to, and you look at it like, oh, awesome, and then you just walk down a path. Like, you can never go anywhere else. And it's just
you can never explore.
And it's just interesting because it looks like you could explore. I mean, there's one part in the game which made me laugh, where it's like, oh no, I'm trying to get through the specific gate, but I need to find 3 things to unlock it, and then I'm on a path adjacent to where I need to go, and it's like 1 meter above where I need to go. I'm like, Senua, you can just step down. Like, come on, it's right there. But the game's like, no, you can't go that way. You have to obviously unlock the door to get there. It's weird how restrictive it is on that front.
Yeah, to the point of being, like, nonsensical.
Yeah, look, that was just one very blatant moment. I was like, come on, this feels silly. But look, all that said, I would still recommend playing it. I mean, it's on Game Pass, so if you have a subscription, you don't have to like invest actual money into it, and in the hundreds of.
I think that's actually somewhat of a savior to Hellblade, because I don't see, especially with the sort of chatter around it, and the importance that a lot of the industry, well, a lot of people who play games now put on game length, which I get it. If you're spending $70, you want to like seek out some worth from that. So hearing that a game only lasts 6 to 8 hours is like, oof, I don't want to, maybe I'll wait for that on sales. So I think Game Pass will definitely help this game. But yeah, I mean, Microsoft also saying that they've greenlit a third game, I think in this day and age means absolutely fucking nothing.
Yeah.
A year ago they were singing the praises of
Tango Gameworks.
Tango Gameworks being like, Hi-Fi Rush was a bigger success than we anticipated, and this and that, award-winning, blah, 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 and now they don't exist anymore. So, yeah, I'm curious to see what the future holds for Ninja Theory, and if the third game even is a Hellblade, maybe it's something completely different.
I think
they're a good studio, so...
Like, not for any reason other than I don't like Hellblade. That's not the case at all. It's just Microsoft falls into this trap of they get a good franchise going and they just sequelize it to death. It's like...
I think they really want that, the thing that Sony has, which is like story-driven game that also sells a system because it looks so good, a la God of War or Ghost of Tsushima or The Last of Us. But Hellblade is nowhere near the sort of... I don't think it will make the same impact that any of those games have made.
Interestingly, Hellblade 2 has a God of War thing where it's just one camera shot.
That's pretty cool.
I could be wrong, but I don't think... our God of War is very much like the camera's always on Kratos, panning out, zooming in, whatever. And this is very similar, apart from, if you changing levels, whatever, the camera will like pull out, go like fly across the land, zoom back in, and then Senua's like walking. And it's like a very cool transition. But it's just interesting because I think they've taken inspiration from God of War, because it is a cool narrative device. So it's like there's no cuts, it's just one camera.
You're never cutting to black, and it's never doing a hard cut to a different character. Yeah, it is cool. I like when games do that, but I mean, that's not a system selling feature anymore.
We have no load screens.
Yeah, it's like, that's nice.
Not you, Starfield. You sit down.
yeah, fucking hell, could you imagine? Cool. That's Hellblade. I'm curious to see it. I'm very... Me being the visual like nerd that I am, I'm keen to see it in person.
What's nice is
I just really thought this would be like a big breakout hit for Microsoft, and it does not seem to be that. Yeah.
Look, it's interesting because it's a good game. Do not get me wrong. Like, I enjoyed playing it, but it's a system seller. It is not. What's cool for someone like you,
just for comparison's sake, like, we have that little prediction sheet that's going where we try and predict like meta scores for games, and I thought it would hit like an 86. You thought an 87. I think it's currently on 81.
It's 81. Yeah, we're all wrong.
Yeah. So that just kind of goes to show where our thinking was, and it just wasn't. I think that's probably where Microsoft thinking was as well, but just didn't end up being that way.
90 game easy.